All right, today we are diving into an absolutely incredible piece of hidden history. It's a medical mystery that basically rewrites a fundamental chapter in how we understand our own bodies.
So, let me ask you a quick question. If I ask you to name the person who first figured out how our blood circulates, who's the first name that pops into your head?
And hey, if you said William Harvey, the famous English physician from the 17th century, you're not wrong. I mean, that's the name we all learn in school, right? His work in 1628 was, for sure, a landmark moment in science.
But what if I told you that the real answer, the core of that discovery, was actually described in detail centuries earlier? What if the true story was just buried in a lost manuscript, waiting for someone to find it?
Yeah, our story doesn't kick off in some dusty 17th century lab. Nope. It starts way more recently, in 1924, inside the Prussian State Library in Berlin. This is where the whole detective story really begins.
So, this Egyptian physician, Dr. M. El-Tatawi, he's just doing his work, and he comes across this thing, Manuscript 62243. Now, the full title? Yeah, it's a bit of a mouthful. But what was inside? Oh man, it was a bombshell. A description of the heart and lungs that was centuries ahead of its time.
Okay, to really get how big of a deal this manuscript was, we've got to hit the rewind button. We need to understand the theory that it completely shattered, an idea that had medicine in a chokehold for over 1,000 years.
This was all thanks to Galen, back around 150 AD. I mean, this guy was a giant in ancient medicine. And his theory was that blood was actually made in the liver. And to get from one side of the heart to the other, he imagined these tiny, invisible pores in the wall dividing the heart, the septum.
So right off the bat, Galen's theory had a couple of huge problems. First, he literally had to invent invisible pores because, well, the septum is a solid wall of muscle. There's no way through. And second, he thought the liver was the star of the show, totally missing that the heart is this incredible, powerful engine driving the whole system. But way before Harvey, even before the big names of the Renaissance, there was this one physician who looked at Galen's 1,000-year-old idea and had the guts to say, hang on a second, that's just not right.
And that man's name was Ibn Nafis. He was this absolutely brilliant physician working out of Damascus and Cairo in the 13th century. Today, a lot of people consider him the true father of circulatory physiology.
And this right here, this is the mic drop moment, in his own words. Writing around at 1242, Ibn Nafis just lays it out there. The septum is not perforated. There are no pores, visible or invisible. So where does the blood go? He said it has to take a detour, through the lungs.
And then he just spelled out the whole thing, what we now call pulmonary circulation. He described blood going from the right side of the heart to the lungs, it mixes with air there, gets refreshed, and then it travels back to the left side of the heart, ready to be pumped out to the rest of the body. I mean, that is a perfect, spot-on description written in the 13th century. It's incredible. Okay, so this brings us to the biggest question in this whole mystery, right? If Ibn Nafis figured this out in 1242, why in the world did it take until the 1500s and 1600s for this idea to pop up in Europe? What happened? Why was there this huge gap of silence?
Just look at this timeline. It really shows you how massive this gap was. You've got Galen's theory just dominating for over a millennium. Then, bam, 1242, Ibn Nafis gets it right. And then, nothing. Crickets for 300 years until Michael Servetus finally describes a similar idea in Europe.
So how did this idea finally crawl back into the light in Europe? Well, it wasn't one big revelation. It was more like pieces of a puzzle falling into place. You had Michael Servetus describing it, weirdly enough, in a book about theology. Then the famous anatomist Vesalius, who at first just went along with Galen, in a later edition of his book, he's like, I can't actually find these pores. Then Realdus Columbus publishes a really clear description, probably building on all this growing doubt. It was a slow, clunky rediscovery of something that had already been figured out perfectly centuries before.
So, now that the lost manuscript is found, now that the evidence is on the table, what's the verdict? How do historians today see Ibn Nafis's place in history?
Well, the consensus among modern historians is pretty much unanimous. It is absolutely fair to say the discovery of pulmonary circulation belongs to Ibn Nafis. He was the distant precursor, the one who laid the foundation long before Harvey came along and put the whole picture together.
And some historians, like Edward Coppola, take it a step further. They argue that his theory wasn't totally forgotten. It might have trickled down through the centuries, in bits and pieces, influencing the very European scientists who ended up getting all the credit. When you just boil it all down, it comes back to this one staggering number, 300. Ibn Nafis was about 300 years ahead of his time, describing this fundamental process of how our bodies work.
And that just leaves you thinking, doesn't it? The story of Ibn Nafis was literally hiding on a library shelf for 700 years. It really makes you wonder, how many other brilliant minds, how many other game-changing discoveries are just lost to history, waiting in some forgotten manuscript for someone to find them?